On this video, we are going to cover the urinary system, also known as the renal system or the urinary tract. The urinary system consists of the kidneys, the ureter, the bladder, and the urethra. The purpose of the urinary system is to eliminate waste from the body, to regulate blood volume and blood pressure, to control levels of electrolytes, metabolites, and to regulate the blood pressure. And so that's what we're going to be looking at as we go through this video and a couple of future videos. So the entire purpose of the urinary system is to keep the body at homeostasis, that steady body state. The urinary system does this by controlling the composition and the volume of the blood. For example, do you ever wonder where urine comes from? Urine is the waste that's removed by the kidneys from the blood. And so the removal of water and solutes from the blood, and then it'll selectively restore anything the body can reuse. So if it's waste and the body can't use it, it's going to be removed from the body by the urinary system. If it's something the body can reuse, it's going to be added back into the blood. The excessive water, the ions, and the solutes, any toxins, that's all going to be excreted out of the body in the form of urine. The composition of the urinary system includes 2 kidneys, 2 ureters, 1 bladder, and 1 urethra. Other functions of the urinary system include regulating blood pressure. If the urinary system is not functioning properly, it's not removing waste from the blood, then there's going to be excess waste in the blood that's going to increase the blood pressure. So it's going to regulate the blood pressure by producing and excreting the enzyme renin. Renin regulates blood volume by water retention. It's also going to be producing and secreting erythropoietin. Erythropoietin stimulates the formation of red blood cells, and it's going to regulate the blood pH. It's going to make it acidic. It's also going to activate vitamin D. The functioning unit of the urinary system is the nephron. The nephron is what begins separating out the waste out of the blood. There are millions of nephrons in the kidneys. Now here we have a glomerulus. We've got a proximal convoluted tubule here. Now on this glomerular capsule, we have little arterioles that are going to be bringing blood into this glomerular capsule. Now the glomerular capsule is also called Bowman's capsule, and Bowman was the scientist who discovered this. There are millions of Bowman's capsules or glomerular capsules within the kidneys. So the afferent arteriole is larger. It's bringing more blood into the glomerular capsule. The efferent arteriole is much smaller. So we have more blood coming in than we have leaving. And as a result, we have a bottleneck, or we have a pressure gradient here. And what that does is that pressure forces the waste out of the blood into this capsule, into the proximal convoluted tubule. So together, the glomerulus and its capsule are called the renal corpuscle. The glomerular capillaries are fenestrated, meaning they're very porous. They're going to allow substances except blood cells and very large proteins to pass from the capillaries into the glomerular capsule. This is going to allow them to pass through those tubules, to have the waste being separated and the reusable material that the body can use to be reabsorbed. So the glomerular capsule is surrounding the fenestrated capillaries, and the outer layer is the parietal layer. It's made up of simple squamous epithelium. And then the visceral layer, which is right next to the glomerulus, is made up of epithelial cells called podocytes. It's called podocytes because it has arm-like projections like an octopus. The proximal convoluted tubules, or abbreviated PCT, are the tubules that are attached to the glomerular capsule. So this is the first passageway that the waste would pass through. Now if we look at a cross section of this under the microscope, it would look like simple cuboidal epithelium. However, if we look at the center area, and if you think of the simple cuboidal epithelium as being like a donut, the very center layer would be fuzzy. And it's fuzzy because it has lots of microvilli, and it has the microvilli to reabsorb anything that the body can use. The proximal convoluted tubule then enters into the descending loop of Henle, which is composed of simple squamous epithelium, and then it becomes the ascending loop of Henle, which has simple cuboidal epithelium. The ascending loop of Henle then becomes the distal convoluted tubule. The distal convoluted tubule is composed of simple cuboidal epithelium. However, the lumen, or the center of the donut, is not fuzzy because there is no longer absorption of material at this point. All right, let's start off with the kidney. We have the ureter, we have the kidney. The very outer part of the kidney, the thin covering, is the capsule. Then we have the two main layers of the kidney. We have the cortex and the medulla. Within the medulla, we have the renal pyramid. We're going to look at the pyramid here. Now you'll notice that our nephron is in the renal pyramid area, and it is in both the cortex and the medulla. I do want you to be aware of that there are millions of nephron systems. And so don't think that there's just one that separates all of the waste out of the blood to the kidney, but millions of these. Now let's take this and look at it a little bit closer. So here we have the glomerulus, or the glomerular capsule, Bowman's capsule. We have the afferent arteriole bringing more blood in than we have leaving through the efferent arteriole. What that does is it causes that bottleneck appearance. That bottleneck pressure separates out all the waste and such except for the blood cells and for large proteins. That material is going to pass through the proximal convoluted tubules. The proximal convoluted tubules, if we were to do a cross section, are made up of simple cuboidal epithelium. The lumen, or the center part of that, is fuzzy because there's reabsorption going on. So the material passes through that, and then it goes through a loop system. Notice the change right here. That's because it then changes to simple squamous epithelium. This is the descending loop of Henle. It becomes the ascending loop of Henle. The ascending loop of Henle, the tissue is changing into simple cuboidal epithelium. Now we have a change right here. This becomes the distal convoluted tubule. The distal convoluted tubule is made up of simple cuboidal epithelium. However, the lumen is not fuzzy. The distal convoluted tubule then empties into the collecting duct. Now here we have another picture of the same thing, of the nephron. We have the afferent arteriole, the efferent arteriole, Bowman's capsule, the proximal convoluted tubule, the loop of Henle, the distal convoluted tubule, and the collecting duct. Now the collecting duct is going to lead to the pelvis of the kidney, and then from the pelvis of the kidney, then it will leave through the ureter out to the bladder and then to the urethra. Just going over one more time, that when we look at our renal pyramid, you'll see the area that is the renal medulla. You'll see the area that's the renal cortex. And I do want you to see that the nephron system does extend into both the medulla and the cortex. There are different types of nephrons that are classified, and they're classified according to their position. The juxtamedullary nephron, it originates in the inner 1/3 of the cortex. It has very long loops of Henle that will extend down deep into the medulla. The cortical nephrons, these are going to originate in the outer 2/3 of the cortex, but they're going to have very short loops of Henle, and they do not go deep into the medulla. The collecting ducts, again, collect the material from the distal convoluted tubule. They will actually collect from many distal convoluted tubules, and then they will merge to make 30 papillary ducts. The papillary ducts are going to be located near the renal papilla, which is the tip of the renal pyramids. And then it will take the urine into the renal papilla, and then the urine will pass from that into the pyramid to the minor calyx, to the major calyx, to the renal pelvis, and then to the ureters. So I like to ask, this is a short answer question, but this is just to give us a flow of how urine moves from the glomerular capsule to the proximal convoluted tubule to the ascending and descending loop of Henle, to the distal convoluted tubule, to the collecting ducts. From the collecting ducts, it will move to the papillary duct. Papillary duct is at the tip of the renal pyramid, then moves to the minor calyx, the major calyx, the renal pelvis, and then from the renal pelvis, it's going to leave the kidney. So what we're looking at is from right here to right there. We're looking at the nephron system, but in all of this section, we're looking at the kidney. And then once it leaves the kidney, then it would go to the ureter, to the bladder, to the urethra, and then out of the body. Kidneys get a blood supply. The renal arteries are what brings the blood to the kidneys. The renal veins are going to be what takes the blood away from the kidneys. In addition to the renal arteries are going to branch. The first branch of the renal arteries are the segmental arteries. Segmental arteries are going to supply segments in the pelvis area of the kidney. The interlobular arteries take blood to the renal columns. The arcuate arteries are going to take blood across the renal pyramid, and then the interlobular arteries take blood into the cortex. The peritubular capillaries take blood from the efferent arteriole to the interlobular veins, and then the veins in the kidney correspond to the arteries in the kidney. So they're going to take the blood away from those sections.